Someone planned this for weeks, not days, weeks. They stood outside an 84-year-old woman's home in broad daylight or close enough to it and watched, measured, memorized. Then they came back in the dark and took her. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for over 10 weeks, and what investigators are now saying about the person who did this should make every American paying attention genuinely uncomfortable. I am Sandra. This is The True Crime, and what we are covering today is the part of this story that most coverage is still not saying clearly enough. If you are new here, subscribe. This channel does not do surface level, not on a case like this. Before we get into what is new, let us establish the foundation, because the latest reporting only makes sense against the backdrop of what we already know. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. She lived in a quiet residential neighborhood in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, Arizona, a home her family had occupied for decades. She had regular visitors, limited mobility, a daughter who lived nearby, a pacemaker connected wirelessly to her cell phone. On February 1st, sometime around 2 in the morning, she was taken. The confirmed timeline: at 1:47 a.m., the Nest camera outside her home disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., that same system detected motion and produced images that should not have existed, given the camera had no active subscription, but which Google recovered from server-side data anyway. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker spiked and went silent. Her phone stayed on the counter. Her purse stayed behind. The back doors were found propped open. No shoes on her feet. That is what confirmed evidence tells us. Everything else, the rushed judgment, the inexperienced team, the specialized suspect, the sheriff's mounting problems, builds from that foundation. The family knew from the very first phone call that this was not a woman who wandered off. Savannah said it publicly. Her sister said it at the scene. Nancy could not walk to her mailbox independently. And yet the working assumption in those first critical hours, according to reporting now confirmed across multiple independent outlets, pointed exactly in that wrong direction. That assumption cost this investigation something it cannot get back. This weekend, the rushed judgment story broke fully into the open. The Irish Star, the Mirror US, and MSN all published detailed reporting within hours of each other, describing what they are calling a rush judgment made by police in the earliest phase of this case. When multiple credible editorial teams publish the same sourced story simultaneously, it is generally because the sourcing is solid enough that none of them felt they were going out on a limb alone. What that reporting describes is specific. The personnel initially assigned to this case lacked the experience that a disappearance of this nature required. MSN's headline was direct: inexperienced team under fire in Guthrie case. The decisions made in those first hours about how to classify the scene, how long to preserve it, what assumptions to operate under, were made by people who were not equipped to make them correctly under that kind of pressure. The downstream consequences were significant and permanent. Crime scene tape came down before the FBI arrived. That is not a new piece of information. It has been reported before. But the new reporting this weekend adds the framing that this decision was part of a broader pattern of rushed, inexperienced judgment rather than an isolated procedural lapse. Forensic analysts who have examined this case publicly have been specific about what that cost. The walkway surface near Nancy's front door, visible in the Nest footage, with the suspect's foot placements documented, could have been processed for electrostatic shoe print lifts if the scene had been held. The footage showing where he stepped existed. The surface he stepped on existed. The window to extract prints from that surface existed for a finite period of time after the crime. That window closed because the scene was released, because someone made a judgment call that this was not the kind of scene that needed to be held that carefully for that long under those conditions. Former detectives who have responded publicly to this new reporting have not been willing to excuse it. The physical evidence at that scene, blood on the porch, doors propped open, no personal items taken, communicated a specific story to anyone trained to read it. The story it communicated was not vulnerable elderly person wandered away. It was something considerably more serious. And treating it as anything less in those first hours was the mistake that everything else flows from. Now, here is what is genuinely new and what has not received the analytical attention it deserves. A private investigator publicly analyzed the behavioral evidence in this case this weekend and reached a conclusion that investigators close to the case have likely already reached privately. The person or people who took Nancy Guthrie operated with a specialized skill set. That phrase, specialized skill set, is doing a lot of work. Let us break down what it actually means when applied to what we know about this crime. Pre-surveillance is the starting point. The Google footage recovered from January 11th, nearly 3 weeks before the abduction, shows the same individual present at the property. Same build, same gait, same clothing. He was not there by accident. He was there deliberately, gathering information. That is reconnaissance. It is a skill, not an instinct. People do not naturally conduct structured reconnaissance of a target location unless they have been trained to think that way, have studied how to do it, or have done it before. The camera disabling is the second element. He knew the camera was there before he approached directly. He interfered with it before getting into its primary field of view. That kind of camera awareness, understanding how surveillance equipment works, where its coverage zones begin and end, and how to neutralize it without triggering a response, is not general knowledge. It is specific knowledge that comes from one of a limited number of places. The tactical flashlight in the mouth is the third. Both hands free, light controlled, approach executed in darkness without compromising operational capability. That technique is used by military personnel, law enforcement officers, and individuals who have specifically trained in close quarters operations. It does not appear in the behavioral repertoire of someone who decided to commit a crime impulsively. Private investigators who consult on abduction cases have noted consistently that this combination, pre-surveillance, camera awareness, tactical equipment use, and a clean exit with no eyewitnesses, points toward a specific category of perpetrator. Not a random stranger, not someone who saw an opportunity and acted. Someone who identified a target, built a plan, acquired the equipment, executed the operation, and disappeared. The International Business Times, reporting this weekend, used the word vanish, describing how the kidnappers used specialized skills to vanish. 10 weeks with no publicly named suspect in a major American city with federal investigative resources deployed is not an accident. It reflects sustained operational discipline in the period after the crime, which is, if anything, harder to maintain than the discipline required during it. Sheriff Chris Nanos has a new problem, and it has nothing to do with the investigation directly, which is precisely what makes it so damaging. Fresh allegations against the Pima County Sheriff surfaced this weekend across Hindustan Times, the Sunday Guardian, and AOL. The core claim: Nanos carried a loaded, undeclared firearm through a TSA security checkpoint. This channel presents that as a reported allegation, not a confirmed fact. The full details, when this occurred, what the specific circumstances were, and what the outcome was, have not been completely established in publicly available reporting. What is established is that multiple credible outlets deemed the allegation credible enough to publish. The timing is the issue. In isolation, a TSA incident involving a law enforcement officer might generate a news cycle and fade. In the context of an ongoing high-profile missing persons investigation, where Nanos' judgment and leadership are already under sustained public scrutiny, it becomes something different. It becomes another data point in a pattern that voters investigators, and the public are increasingly being asked to evaluate. AOL's framing was pointed. The stalled case is stirring up past scandals. The implication is clear. The Guthrie investigation has created a spotlight on Nanos' leadership that is now illuminating problems that existed before Nancy Guthrie disappeared. That is politically dangerous in ways that extend well beyond this single case. A recall effort against Nanos was reportedly already underway. That effort now has additional material to work with. What matters for the investigation, separate from the political story, is whether the documented tension at the leadership level of the Pima County Sheriff's Office is filtering down into the working relationship between the sheriff's deputies and the FBI agents on the Joint Task Force. Previous reporting suggested that relationship had stabilized at the working level, even as the leadership friction continued. Whether that remains true under increased pressure is something worth monitoring. There is a detail buried in the weekend's reporting that deserves its own examination, and it involves a name that has not been widely discussed. The question surfaced publicly: what did Cameron see? The family, according to reporting, has asked this question in a way that suggests Cameron is a real person, a witness, a neighbor, someone who was present or nearby during the relevant time window, who may have observed something that has not been fully incorporated into the public picture of this case. Who Cameron is has not been confirmed in any publicly available reporting. Whether Cameron is a neighbor, a passerby, someone with a regular presence in the area, or someone connected to the property in some other way is unknown from what has been published. What is clear is that the family believes Cameron saw something, and that what Cameron saw matters to understanding what happened. In missing persons investigations, witness accounts from people physically present near the scene in the relevant time window can be transformative. They can confirm or contradict the timeline. They can add detail to the physical description of the suspect or suspects. They can place a vehicle at a specific location that investigators have not yet been able to account for. They can close gaps that no camera footage or cell tower data can fill. If Cameron has spoken to investigators, which one would assume they have given the family's awareness of them, then that account is already part of the investigative record. If Cameron has not been formally interviewed, or if the account they gave was not weighted appropriately by the initial inexperienced team, then following up on that witness represents a potentially significant opportunity. The family asking this question publicly suggests they believe the answer matters. That is worth paying attention to. The no assault claim has created a specific problem for how this case is being understood publicly, and a former detective has now pushed back on it directly. According to reporting, a claim has surfaced that the evidence at the scene does not support an assault having occurred. A former detective who responded publicly to this assertion was not dismissive, but was careful to note that the physical evidence and this claim do not easily coexist. The blood on the front porch has been examined by forensic analysts publicly. What they noted, based on the available photography, which is admittedly not crime scene quality, is that the blood appears aerated, small oxygen bubbles consistent with blood that came from the nasopharyngeal region, the nose and mouth. That presentation is different from blood produced by a cut or a surface wound. It is the kind of blood produced when someone is struck in the face, when a nose bleeds forcefully, or when blood is expelled from the airway under pressure. If the no assault claim is accurate, what explains the aerated blood on the porch? One possibility: Nancy's thin skin and blood-thinning medication could have produced bleeding from minor contact that would not constitute assault in a legal or clinical definition. Another possibility: the blood on the porch belongs to someone other than Nancy. A third: the no assault claim is being used in a technical sense that does not encompass what the physical evidence suggests actually happened. A former detective who analyzed this publicly acknowledged the contradiction directly. Without the full forensic reports, which are not publicly available, it is not possible to reconcile the no assault framing with the blood deposition evidence from outside. What it does communicate is that there are elements of the forensic picture that have not been fully shared with the public. And those elements may be considerably more significant than what the quote-unquote no assault framing implies. The question of whether Savannah Guthrie received a message claiming her mother is dead is being reported, and it demands precision. AOL published this question directly this weekend. This channel treats it with the care it requires. In organized kidnapping cases with ransom demands, communication from perpetrators is part of the operational pattern. They send proof of life to establish leverage. They may send proof of death to establish finality if the negotiation has failed. They may send fabricated versions of either to create pressure or test the family's response. And they sometimes send communications designed specifically to be intercepted by law enforcement, feeding false information into the investigative channel. Whether Savannah received a genuine message, a fabricated one, a law enforcement managed communication, or nothing at all, cannot be confirmed from publicly available information. What can be said is that if any such message exists, investigators know about it. The Guthrie family has been cooperative throughout. Any communication received would have been turned over immediately. What this question adds analytically is a window into the state of the ransom negotiation, if one ever fully occurred. The Bitcoin demand referenced in the ransom note has not been publicly confirmed as having received any funds. If the perpetrators have shifted from demanding payment to declaring an outcome, that shift tells investigators something important about where the perpetrators are psychologically and operationally. It also potentially tells them something about whether Nancy Guthrie is still alive. This channel will not speculate beyond that point. The family is living with whatever they know. They deserve privacy around that knowledge and accuracy in how public reporting characterizes it. Pull all of it together, the specialized skills, the rushed judgment, the witness question, the forensic contradiction, the sheriff's compounding problems, and a picture emerges that is both more complicated and more solvable than the public narrative sometimes suggests. More complicated because the early investigative failures genuinely narrowed the window of recoverable evidence. What was lost in those first hours cannot be reconstructed. The footprints are gone. The full forensic integrity of the primary scene is gone. Whatever momentum an experienced team might have generated in those critical first 24 hours, gone. More solvable because the perpetrators made contact with the digital world in ways that left records. The December searches, the cell tower signals from 2 a.m. on February 1st, the Nest footage recovered from a camera that was supposed to be inactive, the Bitcoin address in the ransom note, the biological material at the primary scene, complex as it is, the potential second crime scene, wherever Nancy was taken after leaving her home. None of those threads have been eliminated. The DNA science is advancing. The search warrant process, slow as it is, continues to move through the legal system. The cryptocurrency trace, if funds moved, is being worked by federal financial investigators with tools that most criminal actors significantly underestimate. And somewhere, someone knows something. The operational discipline required to stay silent for 10 weeks is extraordinary. Most people cannot maintain it. Most groups cannot either. At some point, someone talks to someone who talks to someone else. At some point, a financial transaction that seemed untraceable is traced. At some point, a DNA deconvolution method that did not exist 6 months ago produces a profile. Former investigators describe the final phase of cases like this as a compression, where threads that have been pulled independently for months suddenly begin connecting to each other. When that compression happens, cases that looked stalled for a year can resolve in days. 10 weeks is not forever, and the evidence has not gone anywhere. There is something that gets lost in the investigative detail, something that the specialized skills analysis, the rushed judgment reporting, and the sheriff's TSA allegations can collectively obscure if you are not careful. A woman is missing. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She was taken in the middle of the night with no shoes on her feet, no phone, no purse, nothing that would allow her to communicate where she is or what she needs. She has a pacemaker. She has limited mobility. She was dependent on the people around her in the normal course of her daily life. And she has now been separated from all of them for more than 10 weeks. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show. She described that choice as hard. It was. Getting up every morning and performing the functions of a public professional life while your mother is missing, while you do not know if she is alive, while you are managing relationships with law enforcement and with media and with a public that is watching your face every day for signs of what you know, is a particular kind of endurance that most people will never be asked to demonstrate. The family asking publicly what Cameron saw is not just an investigative question. It is a family reaching for anything that moves them closer to understanding what happened to someone they love. Every question they ask publicly, every detail they surface, every interview Savannah gives, it is all in service of the same thing: finding her, or at minimum, finding out what happened to her. Nancy Guthrie had visitors. She had family close by. She had decades of life in a community that knew her name, knew her face, knew her routines. She was not invisible before this happened. She should not be invisible now, and she will not be on this channel for as long as this case remains unresolved. The investigative landscape as of this weekend includes several active threads that analysts and former investigators consider most promising. The digital search history tied to the property, dozens of queries from Arizona in December, represents potentially the clearest path to an identity, because it is the kind of evidence that cannot be manufactured after the fact. Whoever conducted those searches was using real devices on real networks through real platforms that retain real records. The legal process of extracting those records is slow, but it is moving. The cell tower data from the 2 a.m. window on February 1st is a narrow, analyzable data set. Late night hours produce less network noise. Anomalous devices, phones present in that neighborhood at that moment with no regular reason to be there, stand out against the baseline. If investigators have cross-referenced the cell tower data with the December search history and found overlap, the same device or the same network appearing in both data sets, that overlap would represent a significant investigative development. The cryptocurrency trace, if funds move through the Bitcoin address referenced in the ransom note, is being worked by people who do this professionally. Every blockchain transaction is public. The question is not whether the record exists, it does, but whether anyone cashed out in a way that required identity verification. If they did, that verification record exists in a private database that federal investigators can reach through legal process. The DNA is the slowest thread, but potentially the most definitive. Complex mixtures are hard. The science is advancing. A second crime scene, wherever Nancy was held or transported, offers a second opportunity for biological collection that may not carry the same complexity as the primary scene sample. That second scene has not been publicly identified, but investigators almost certainly know more about it than they are sharing. Each of these threads is live. Each is being pulled. The question is, which one connects first and what it connects to? 10 weeks. A suspect with a specialized skill set who has not been publicly named. An investigation built on a compromised foundation. A sheriff facing questions about his conduct that go beyond this case. A family still waiting. And a body of evidence that is still being worked slowly, carefully, and out of public view. The new reporting this weekend adds something important to how this case should be understood. This was not a random crime. It was not impulsive. It was planned by someone who knew what they were doing, prepared for longer than investigators initially recognized, and has managed to stay invisible for over 2 months in the middle of one of the most watched missing persons investigations in recent American history. That is frightening. It is also, in a specific way, clarifying, because the same planning that made this crime difficult to solve in the short term also left more traces than an impulsive crime would have. More searches, more surveillance, more communication, more transactions, more exposure across more time. And every one of those exposures left a record somewhere. Records do not disappear. Evidence does not forget. And investigators with federal resources, advancing forensic science, and 10 weeks of accumulated data are not standing still. If you know anything about this case, anything at all, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The reward exceeds $1 million. Anonymity is protected. If this video gave you a clearer picture of where this investigation actually stands, share it. Someone in your circle needs to see this. Hit like and subscribe to The True Crime, where we follow these cases until they are resolved, because justice does not have an expiration date. Nancy Guthrie has not been forgotten here. I am Sandra. This is The True Crime. Thank you for watching.